The city woke before the sun. Concrete towers rose like strangers over old family houses whose walls still carried the color of red earth. Narrow lanes curved between new roads, as if trying not to be erased. Car horns cried without patience. Street vendors called out the prices of fruit and bread. From a distant mosque came the soft call to prayer, floating above the noise like an elder's voice trying to be heard. This city was alive, restless, and divided. One foot stood on ancestral ground, the other rushed toward a future that did not wait. Tradition breathed here, but only if it learned to breathe fast. The father arrived in this city carrying more than a small bag. He carried grief. When his wife was lowered into the village soil, a part of him went with her. The village elders told him, life must continue. So he followed the road that led to the city, holding his young daughter's hand, promising the ancestors that he would not lose himself there. He rented a small apartment and spoke to his daughter with quiet firmness. "I brought you here to survive," he told her one evening. "But survival does not mean forgetting who we are." In his heart, he made a vow, to raise her the right way, even if the city tried to teach her another language. Days turned into years of labor. He woke before dawn and returned after dark. His hands grew rough. His back learned pain. The room felt empty without his wife's voice, and loneliness became his daily companion. He believed rules were walls and discipline was shelter. In the city, softness felt dangerous. He feared that kindness would be mistaken for weakness and weakness would invite shame. "A father who bends too much breaks his house," he often said, repeating a proverb he learned as a boy. So he stood firm, even when his heart wanted rest. His daughter grew quietly, like a tree that does not announce its roots. She went to school, learned the ways of books and screens, and walked the city with careful eyes. At home, she covered her hair, spoke with respect, and moved with restraint. She understood both worlds, the speed of the city and the weight of her father's expectations. When friends laughed loudly, she smiled softly. When new ideas came, she listened but did not forget where she came from. "You are different," a neighbor once said. The father heard such words with pride. In the eyes of the community, she was disciplined, well-raised, pure. A daughter untouched by the chaos outside. And so, under the same roof, two fires burned. One was fear shaped by love. The other was strength shaped by silence. Outside, the city kept shouting. Inside, tradition whispered, hoping it would still be heard. In the father's heart, honor was not a word. It was a wall. A wall built brick by brick from village teachings, elders' warnings, and his own fear of disgrace. Everything he was rested on that wall. When people spoke his name, he wanted them to nod with respect. When they looked at his home, he wanted them to see order. And at the center of that order stood his daughter. "She is my mirror," he once told an old friend. "If it breaks, I am the one who bleeds." To him, her purity was not about youth or choice. It was about survival. In the city, where stories moved faster than truth, one rumor could bury a man alive. He believed a daughter's reputation was the roof over a father's head. If it cracked, rain would fall on everyone inside. This belief had been handed down like an inheritance. A man's respect lived in his household. If the house stood firm, the man stood tall. If it shook, he was already fallen. That night, the apartment felt smaller than usual. Darkness settled gently, but it carried weight. Outside, the city refused to sleep. Cars passed, horns cried, distant laughter rose and fell. Inside, the light was dim, and the air was thick with unspoken thoughts. The daughter had gone to her room early. The father sat alone, listening to the city breathe through the window. Something felt wrong, though nothing had happened yet. Silence pressed against his chest, heavy and patient, like a warning that had not found words. He stood and walked down the narrow passage. His steps were slow. Even the floor seemed to listen. When his eyes fell on the bed, the world stopped moving. Blood stained the sheets. Not much, but enough. His breath caught in his throat. His hands froze at his sides. For a moment, he could not remember how to blink. The light above flickered, weak and unsure, as if it too was afraid of what it showed. Time stretched thin. His ears rang, then emptied. The city outside vanished. No horns. No voices. No prayer calls. Only the sound of his own heartbeat, loud and painful. "This cannot be," he whispered, though no one answered. He did not shout. He did not move. Shock held him like invisible hands. In that red stain, he saw shame, loss, and every fear he had carried since leaving the village. Questions rose like fire, but none found shape. His strength drained away, replaced by cold dread. The city had gone quiet. Inside him, everything collapsed at once. Anger tried to rise, but fear was faster. Fear of disgrace. Fear of judgment. Fear that the wall he built with his whole life had cracked without a sound. And in that silence, fate stood watching, waiting for what would come next. The blood on the sheets was more than a stain. It was a signal, a language older than the city streets. In its quiet red, it spoke of honor threatened, walls cracked, and a father's control slipping through his fingers. It whispered that fate had arrived, uninvited, and would not leave until it had its answer. He stood frozen, the air heavy around him, as if the apartment itself was holding its breath. "This cannot, not here," he muttered, voice trembling. His hands shook, not from anger but from fear deeper than any he had felt in the village. Fear of shame, fear of loss, fear that the world outside, which had always tested his rules, now mocked them silently. The seed of conflict, quiet but growing, had taken root. He thought of the city, sprawling and untamed, a place the elders never raised him for. Its lights blinked like eyes watching, and its streets carried voices he could not silence. Social media, strangers, a million unseen hands, all moving faster than wisdom, faster than tradition. Every corner held temptation, every shadow a challenge. Here, his daughter's upbringing was a daily battle between ancient teaching and modern chaos. He blamed himself. The road that brought them here, leaving the village, the safety of kin, the guidance of elders, felt heavier than ever. Had he done wrong by carrying her into this world? Did fate punish those who abandoned the old ways? Every lesson he had carried from home now felt fragile, slipping from his grasp as the city hummed outside the windows. His pride, his rules, his understanding of honor, all threatened by a single, crimson mark. And in that quiet, heavy with the weight of judgment, he realized, fear could be louder than rage, and in its roar, morality itself would tremble. He remembered her every morning, though she had been gone for years. Her laughter, soft as wind through mango leaves, once filled the small apartment. Her hands, gentle yet firm, had guided his daughter through scraped knees and sleepless nights. She had been the balance between love and rules, the bridge that softened the edges of discipline. Now, her absence echoed in every corner, making the walls feel heavier, the floors colder, the air thicker with unsaid things. He clutched his forehead, feeling the weight of every decision. If she were here, she would know what to do, he whispered to the empty room. His grief shaped itself into rigidity. Rules became walls. Silence became armor. He scolded himself as much as he scolded the world, believing that strictness could shield his daughter from shame, from the city, from life itself. And yet, in the quiet of her room, his daughter carried her own weight, unseen and untold. The city pressed on her like 1,000 invisible hands. At school, colleagues' laughter sometimes cut sharper than knives. Online, voices that never knew her whispered judgments she could not answer. Every day she moved through streets that tested patience and walls that demanded perfection. She had learned the language of silence early. One word spoken wrong, one question asked too loudly, and consequences came not just from strangers, but from the father she loved and feared. "I must endure," she said softly to herself, tightening the braid at her hair. Better to be quiet than to be broken. Respectability had become her armor. Obedience was survival. The first lesson the city taught her was simple. Truth can be dangerous, and silence can be salvation. Then came the night that no lesson could have prepared her for. Blood on the sheets, stark and red, framed not desire but suffering. He could not yet understand it, and neither could the neighbors or the rumors that would follow. The stain became a riddle, a pain misunderstood as sin, a warning mistaken for guilt. Hearts raced in uncertainty, eyes widened in fear, and the father's world trembled. What had been hidden, what had been endured silently, now demanded recognition. The mystery hung heavy, as cruel and patient as fate itself, holding every soul in suspense until truth would speak. The city moved around them, but in their narrow apartment, time slowed. From the windows, he noticed the subtle shifts in their small community. Neighbors who once greeted him with smiles now spoke in hushed tones. Doors closed more quickly when he passed. Side glances lingered longer than usual, lips pressed tight as if holding back judgment. The streets themselves seemed to whisper, carrying rumors that had not yet found shape. Suspicion spread like smoke through the alleys, silent, persistent, and impossible to ignore. Every look felt like a test. Every nod, a verdict unspoken. The father felt the weight of it pressing against his chest, heavier than any city traffic, heavier than his own grief. The phone rang, shrill in the quiet of the evening. Relatives from the village, voices firm and unyielding, reminded him of their teachings. "Your daughter is not just yours," one elder said. "She carries the family, the ancestors, and our respect. Do not let the city teach her shame." Each word struck like a drum, echoing the morality of a place far away, yet closer to his heart than the apartment walls. Tradition and modernity collided in his mind, a storm he could not calm. Shame, they said, was inherited, like land or a family name, passed down, unavoidable and heavy. Then came the letters, the calls, the distant council of elders he had not seen in years. Their voices carried authority without presence, wisdom without warmth. They demanded action before rumors hardened into judgment. Honor, they said, must be protected at all cost, even before understanding. The father felt the pressure coil inside him, twisting decisions he had thought firm. He realized that truth could wait, but expectations never would. Outside, the city did not pause. Yet its judgments moved faster than facts, carrying whispers that painted his home with suspicion. Friends, neighbors, even strangers, each became a witness in a trial without evidence. Reputation turned into currency, and the father's name was spent recklessly in the marketplace of rumor. Justice, delayed by fear, felt like a cruel joke. He understood now, the city condemned before it listened, and silence could no longer shield him or his daughter. The walls of their home, once safe, had become a stage for unseen spectators, and every heartbeat carried the weight of a world ready to pass judgment. The father's hands no longer reached for warmth. His hugs became rare, his smiles infrequent, replaced by measured words and sharp eyes. Love had not disappeared. It had buried itself beneath fear, under the weight of honor and the threat of shame. Every gesture of tenderness now felt dangerous, as if softness could invite disaster. "I must hold firm," he whispered to himself in the dark, watching the city lights through the window. "One mistake, and all we built falls apart." Authority took the place of affection, and discipline became the language of care. The daughter moved like a shadow through the apartment. Her shoulders slumped, and the careful grace of her steps hid exhaustion. Meals were eaten quickly, sleep stolen in fragments. Her obedience was armor, but it weighed heavily. "I cannot speak," she thought, closing her eyes at night. Better silence than disappointment. Pain settled into her bones, and the city outside pressed against the walls, pressing against her. Her world had become quiet suffering, invisible to the father whose eyes were filled with worry yet blinded by fear. Outside, the city refused to pause. Sirens wove through the streets, punctuated by horns and distant laughter. Lights flickered in tall towers, mirroring the unease in the apartment. Nights grew longer, heavier, as if darkness itself knew the secrets held inside. Restlessness became routine, an unspoken rhythm that accompanied grief, fear, and silence. The city was alive, but the life it carried only reflected the turbulence within their home. She caught her reflection in the cracked mirror by the door. Two faces stared back, one molded by tradition, composed and obedient, the other a young woman yearning for freedom, recognition, and understanding. The glass fractured her image, splitting her identity in ways that neither city nor village could reconcile. Each crack reflected a different truth: her father's fears, her own hidden burdens, and the impossible space between what was expected and what she truly was. And in that moment, she understood that the time for silence was ending, and the truth, like the light breaking through the cracks, would not wait much longer. The door could not hold back destiny any longer. It creaked open, not with the softness of choice, but with the insistence of fate. The quiet apartment, once a refuge of discipline and silence, became a stage for what could no longer hide. The daughter trembled, and the father froze, realizing that no rules, no walls, could shield them from what life demanded be seen. A nurse, a neighbor, or a sudden illness, whatever brought them here, broke the spell of secrecy. Time slowed as eyes widened, breaths caught, and hearts held tight. Destiny had stepped forward, claiming truth before anyone could prepare. Family arrived in waves, drawn by instinct, by duty, by the invisible pull of ancestral expectation. The father's siblings, cousins, even the distant voice of an aunt, appeared. "This is not yours alone," an elder reminded him, voice soft but unyielding. In African tradition, pain and joy alike belonged to the household, to the community. The private had become communal, and silence could no longer protect anyone. Whispers gave way to questions, fear gave way to shared concern. And then, eyes returned to the sheets. The blood, once red as betrayal, was seen anew. It was no longer a mark of shame but a symbol demanding interpretation, not condemnation. "We must understand before we speak," one elder said, steadying hands on the father's shoulder. The family's moral compass wavered between judgment and curiosity, confusion stretching like a shadow over their faces. The stain had been misunderstood, its meaning tangled in fear rather than truth. Finally, the cause was revealed: suffering without choice. A medical condition, an accident, a silent sacrifice. The blood was not sin but harm. Innocence stood firm, while assumptions crumbled. The father's face softened, disbelief giving way to grief for the years spent fearing what never existed. The cost of misunderstanding purity became clear. Every harsh word, every stern glance, every wall built from fear had weighed heavily on the daughter's spirit. Now, truth had risen, and with it, the chance for healing, humility, and the first taste of forgiveness. The daughter's body spoke the truths her mouth could not. Every tremor, every shiver, every pallor revealed the burden she had carried alone. The father watched, heart constricting with each silent confession her form made. Words had been absent, but her presence was a testament to years of endurance, a language older and more powerful than any sentence. Reality pressed into the room, unapologetic, indifferent to reputation or expectation. No amount of discipline or tradition could erase the story her body told. He saw, at last, the depth of her sacrifice. Each long day at work, every hidden bruise of emotion, each unspoken fear was not weakness but strength. The city, harsh and unforgiving, demanded endurance from the quiet, and she had given it without complaint. "I did what I must," she whispered, voice small, almost lost. "Better to survive in silence than to lose everything I love." Her dignity, painstakingly preserved, was a shield against a world that would not forgive missteps. The father's eyes opened to a revelation long denied. Control had been his religion. Fear had been his moral compass. He realized that his strictness, his obsession with purity, had been less about guidance than about preserving his own pride. I wanted to protect you," he murmured, shame washing over him. Purity had been fear dressed as wisdom, and now regret settled heavier than anger. Every harsh word, every cold glance, every silent night of judgment weighed upon him as he faced the truth. And in that moment, the most painful realization struck: silence had been the true thief. The city, the streets, the rumors, they were not solely to blame. He had allowed fear to overshadow compassion, and in doing so, he had robbed his daughter of the understanding and love she deserved. "I see you now," he said, voice trembling. "I let you carry too much alone. I should have listened sooner." The near loss of her spirit pierced him, leaving a quiet ache that promised change, and perhaps the first steps toward healing. The elders gathered, voices steady and measured, carrying the weight of generations. "A house is only strong when truth lives within it," one intoned, eyes searching the father's face. Their teachings, long cherished, seemed to falter in the face of what had been revealed. The father, hands trembling, realized that obedience to tradition had never prepared him for this moment. Respect for the elders now wrestled with the reality of his daughter's experience. "We taught him to protect, not to judge blindly," murmured a distant cousin. The old beliefs, once unshakable, wavered under the truth they had not seen. Tradition itself, he understood, must bend, must grow, to shelter life instead of suffocating it. Honor, he discovered, was not the rigid wall he had built. It was care, vigilance, and the courage to understand. "I see now," he whispered to himself. "Protection, not punishment, is what our children need." The community's values, once unquestioned, began to shift in the light of clarity. Morality, he realized, must center on justice, not fear. His authority, the shield he had relied on, began to dissolve. Sternness and rigidity gave way to vulnerability and presence. The power that had separated him from his daughter melted as he knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. "I will be your father again," he said softly, tears tracing lines of regret and love. The man of discipline became a man of compassion, learning once more what it meant to guide with understanding rather than control. And finally, the blame that had weighed on her shoulders began to lift. Shame shifted from the daughter to the systems that had imposed silence, the unspoken rules that punished honesty with suspicion. The city's whispers, the community's pressure, even his own fear, they all bore responsibility. Collective guilt emerged, and with it, a quiet promise that no child should suffer for the weight of expectation alone. Truth had reclaimed its place, and with it, justice found its first breath. Rain began to fall in gentle sheets, drumming on the tin roofs of the city. The usual clamor of horns and vendors softened, as if the city itself had drawn a deep breath. Puddles shimmered under the streetlights, reflecting the world as it now stood, suspended between judgment and understanding. The droplets tapped on the windows of the small apartment, a cleansing rhythm that mirrored the unspoken reckoning inside. Nature itself seemed to witness the truth restored, washing away the dust of fear and false shame that had long clouded the household. He lowered his gaze, the weight of expectation lifting from his shoulders. "I cannot let what others think dictate how I love you," he whispered, voice heavy but steady. Control fell away, replaced by warmth he had buried under fear. His daughter's hand in his was no longer a symbol of ownership but of mutual trust. Fear no longer had authority here, love had reclaimed its place. Tradition, he realized, need not be abandoned. It could grow, adapt, and protect life rather than punish it. The elders were wise, but wisdom must be tempered with understanding, he murmured. Culture could guide without crushing, teach without shaming, and honor could be framed in care rather than rigidity. Humility had rewritten the rules he had once thought unchangeable. His daughter lifted her face, eyes glistening not with tears of guilt but with the first light of freedom. She breathed deeply, her shoulders easing from years of tension, her identity no longer chained to a misread symbol. Blood and labels had lost their hold. She was seen, believed, and in that recognition, she found strength beyond fear. "I am still me," she said softly, and for the first time in years, the word felt like a victory, a reclaiming of life and dignity in a city that had once threatened to steal it. The small apartment breathed differently now. Walls that had once held tension and silence seemed to open, welcoming honesty like an old friend returning home. Words that had been unspoken for years found their way into the air, gentle confessions, quiet apologies, and a new promise to see each other clearly. The father's stern gaze softened, not from weakness, but from understanding, and the daughter's shoulders loosened under its warmth. For the first time in many nights, the home felt like a refuge, a place where truth could live safely, and trust began to grow slowly, like a sprout reaching for the sun. He reached for her hand, not with authority, but with care. "I cannot undo the fear I have carried," he said, "but I can walk with you, not above you." She nodded, tears glinting like morning dew, and in that quiet exchange, a deeper bond began to form. Respect was no longer demanded, it was earned, shaped by listening, patience, and humility. Their laughter, rare and cautious, began to fill the spaces that silence had once occupied. Beyond the walls, the city roared on, horns blaring, vendors calling, lights flickering. Yet inside, clarity ruled. The apartment became a sanctuary where modern life and ancestral wisdom could meet without clashing. Decisions were guided not by fear, but by care. Tradition was honored, yet tempered with understanding. On the balcony, clean sheets swayed in the wind, a silent witness to pain washed away yet remembered. The sun struck the cloth like a promise, warmth carrying away old shame, leaving only lessons behind. Through whispered conversations in the neighborhood and cautious smiles, the moral spread quietly. Honor is not a weapon to wield against others, but a responsibility to nurture life and truth. Families began to pause before judgment, and the community learned that shame was not a chain to hang on a girl's shoulders but a collective duty to uphold justice with compassion. And as the city carried on, the father spoke a proverb he hoped would echo longer than their story: "Honor without compassion becomes cruelty, and tradition without truth becomes injustice." Words that were simple, yet heavy with the wisdom of ancestors, meant to travel through generations as a guide, a warning, and a lesson for hearts that would come after.